Cast and bring Tom in. Okay. Again, the usual rules about mobiles. Members, we're recorded. That's a good thing. The committee meeting will be recorded online broadcast throughout Parliament buildings, and just be conscious that the new audio and video equipment in committee rooms is significantly more sensitive, so side conversations will be picked up. First item is I don't have any apologies other than a couple of members who might have to nip out early because this coincides with question time. So item 2 is a ministerial briefing, first day brief. Welcome the Minister and Minister Moore and the Permanent Secretary Katrina Godfrey to the meeting today. And the first in the pack, pages 4 to 45, is the first day briefing paper. DAERA key challenges in pages 46 to 71, and a note from the clerk at page 71 to 77 of an informal meeting that the chair and myself held with the Minister. So I'd like to ask Minister Moore and Katrina, invite you to brief the committee, and then we'll open up for questions after that. Minister, you have to leave no later than 3:45, so ask everyone just be conscious of that there, and also Minister, just be conscious that members may nip in and out for questions as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, Deputy Chair and Chair online and committee members. Let me start by thanking you for inviting me here and congratulating you all on your new roles on the committee. I'm delighted and privileged to be here today addressing the committee as the new Minister of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, and I'm joined with my Permanent Secretary, which is Katrina Godfrey. We're both keen runners, so we've proved to be quite a good tag team to date, and hopefully over the time ahead we'll continue to be that.
One a lot faster than the other, though.
we'll not disclose who. Also, can I put on record my thanks for facilitating what is a Tuesday afternoon meeting, and I totally understand if people need to leave and come in and out, and I do greatly appreciate that. I've been asked to focus in my opening remarks upon what are my key issues and priorities for the Department, and you should have received the first day brief, which should hopefully inform the discussion this afternoon. The Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has an extensive and diverse portfolio which impacts upon us all, including responsibility for protecting and improving our natural environment, farming and food production, animal and plant health, fishing and forest regeneration. It also plays a crucial role in supporting our rural communities. Our agriculture, food and fishery sectors are vital for our food security, a cornerstone of our economy and what knits rural communities together. In many ways, they are leading the world in carbon reduction and environmental action. Nothing will be gained from pitting agriculture and environment against each other. We must all move forward together with an understanding that our economy and the environment are intrinsically linked. During my term, I therefore intend to focus upon the full remit of the Department, seeking to implement policies and strategies that will have the aim of benefiting our climate and the environment while supporting our economically and socially significant agriculture, food and fishery sectors alongside our important rural communities. I intend to listen to, engage and strive to work with the Committee, the Assembly, stakeholders and partners in every part of Northern Ireland and also North-South, East and West. Together I believe strongly that we can achieve a lot more collectively. That said, I do have a number of key immediate issues which I need to tackle, including Lough Neagh, the Environmental Improvement Plan, ammonia, bovine TB and also further to my statement this morning in terms of XL bullies. These may be my immediate issues, but in the next few weeks I'll also be setting out key priorities for my whole portfolio, and I think it's important I say that. In terms of Lough Neagh, in my first week in office I made it a priority to visit Lough Neagh and also meet with the Lough Neagh Partnership. I'm fully committed to urgently addressing the very serious issue of blue-green algae, not least to ensure protection of our beautiful environment, but also to safeguard public and animal health as well as the economy that heavily relies on the loch. Over the past couple of decades, the balance between growing our economy and safeguarding our environment has not been struck correctly. As such, Lough Neagh has been identified as a first-year priority for the Executive. The starting point for Lough Neagh is the Environment Strategy and Northern Ireland's first Environmental Improvement Plan. The blue-green algae issue, most notably seen in Lough Neagh, but also at various other water bodies in Northern Ireland, cannot be seen in isolation from the natural environment more generally, and we cannot tackle its problems in isolation either. The Environmental Improvement Plan, otherwise known as the EIP, and I've got used to the fact that there's lots of acronyms in this department, which is the plan for significantly improving our natural environment, will contain actions set in direction of travel for the coming decades, relevant to improving water quality, including at Lough Neagh. Once it's received executive agreement, I will bring a further and more specific paper on Lough Neagh with a more detailed action plan to a subsequent executive meeting. Once again, I would like to reiterate our natural environment is under significant pressure and most indicators are moving, sadly, in the wrong direction. My officials are also preparing a paper for the Executive Office and the Head of Civil Service Action Plan in a bid to secure significant additional investment likely to be needed to tackle the Lough Neagh algae blooms and water quality issues. I've also had a constructive meeting with the Earl of Shaftesbury on matters relating to the lough, but I cannot fix this alone. It is clear there is need for collective action across government, the private and public sectors, and also local communities. I am determined to continue my pledge to engage with partners and stakeholders to ensure we work together to improve water quality across Northern Ireland, including in Lough Neagh. Unfortunately, despite the actions we will take in the immediate future, which are important we do take them, there is no quick fix, and a recurrence of the blue-green algae blooms is likely this year. If anything, I would detail to the committee they have reappeared already. Real and sustained improvement will take decades. Due to the nature of the algae blooms, actions in the first year may not have the immediate impact expected by the wider community. However, the identified actions, if funded in year one, will see a longer-term benefit to Lough Neagh and in turn other water bodies across Northern Ireland much sooner than would be the case without the early intervention needed. I'll turn now to the ammonia strategy. I'm acutely aware that action on ammonia is required urgently to support our local farm businesses and rural communities to thrive and be sustainable, while at the same time protecting our environment and meeting our legislative requirements. Agriculture in Northern Ireland produces 97% of Northern Ireland's total ammonia emissions, and changes to some farming practices will be required, including increased uptake of established and also new technologies. My department is finalising 2 measures to deliver reductions in agricultural ammonia emissions to deliver better outcomes for nature and for public health. The first of these measures is the ammonia strategy, which will deliver Northern Ireland-wide reductions in ammonia emissions through mandatory manure management requirements and additional voluntary measures. The second of these measures is a new standing advice currently under development and which will be used to provide statutory advice on planning applications. Next, I turn to the Climate Action Plan. I am determined to deliver on the ambition of the Climate Change Act and its target of net zero for Northern Ireland by 2050. The climate emergency is one of the defining policy challenges of this generation, and it is one of my key priorities. We must greatly increase the pace of progress in carbon reduction to deliver on the legal obligations this Assembly has set for us. The next step on our journey is to set our carbon budgets and the interim emission targets for 2030 and 2040. These represent legally binding limits on our carbon emissions. I intend to seek agreement from executive colleagues for the first 3 carbon budgets and the interim target soon. In Northern Ireland's first Climate Action Plan for 2023 to 2027, we will set our approach to net zero and our first carbon budget. And I use the word we deliberately, because while my department is responsible for preparing and publishing the Climate Action Plan, developing a credible climate action plan which delivers on the ambition of the Assembly is a challenge which sits across the entire executive. Net zero requires transformational change across our wider society and also economy. I am fully committed to delivering a climate action plan that can achieve that change in a way which is fair, evidence-based and informed by stakeholders. I am determined that we will publish the draft for consultation in the time ahead. I look forward to engaging with the committee throughout this process. I would note in my opening statement that it states that there's a climate action plan for 2023 to 2027, and we're in 2024, which shows the level of challenge that we have in terms of taking up office here. I'm keen to talk about upfront cost of climate action, or as I believe, as more appropriate, investment. Investing in a net zero pathway now means an improved society for future generations, a society where we live in better insulated homes, lead more active, healthier lives, and create more green jobs, delivering value for our economy and our society. In terms of behavioural science relating to climate change actions, I believe that science and evidence-based decisions are at the forefront of how I want to deliver my remit across as Minister. You will see this in how we address the issues in Lough Neagh, and also how I will deliver on our climate change commitments. Change in behaviours will be fundamentally important in achieving the transformation required. Last week, I opened an event for the Chief Executives Forum on how behavioural science has been used to support the transition to net zero across the UK and Ireland. There is much to be learned from our closest neighbours, and an evidence-based and science-led approach is key to ensuring the delivery of the Executive's statutory commitments for climate change and net zero are as fair as possible for all our people and communities. As well as behavioural science considerations related to climate change, my department is also assessing more broadly its social science needs. A group has been convened which is considering our current knowledge, skills and use of social sciences. The group will also consider future requirements and will assess how best to deliver solutions where gaps exist. In terms of the Farm Support and Development Programme, I welcome the ongoing work on a new Farm Support and Development Programme, and I would like to put on record my thanks to the officials who have done the work over the last number of years in relation to this. There's been a significant amount of work and engagement, and I show great appreciation for that has been undertaken. Its overall objectives are to transition to a more sustainable farming that benefits our climate and environment while supporting our economically and socially significant agricultural sector. Firm foundations of farm support and development have been laid. Importantly, the planned schemes and measures provide levers to contribute to statutory obligations under the Climate Change Act. I do not intend to disturb these, but I do intend to build upon them and move forward with pace. In terms of bovine TB, as members will be aware, bovine tuberculosis is one of the most challenging issues facing cattle farmers in Northern Ireland. I share the committee's concerns regarding the current high rate of TB incidents and the impact this is having on hard-working farm families. With herd instances currently at just under 10%, 1 farm in 10 has experienced the difficulties associated with a new TB breakdown in the past year. And I've already heard directly from industry the devastating impact this is having. Tackling this disease is also a significant impact upon my department's budget. £53 million was spent on the control of TB in the last financial year, with £38 million of this paid in compensation for cattle slaughtered for disease control. A similar amount is being expected to be paid this year. I'm also aware that the Secretary of State's direction, and I note direction, to consult on reducing TB compensation has not been welcomed by the farming community. This consultation is due to close this Friday, the 8th of March, and I would urge everyone with an interest in this matter to express their views. I would outline that the Secretary of State's approach to the general issue of revenue raising is something that causes me great concern and has impeded a lot of the discussions around this matter. Given the extreme pressures on public finances, it is clear that the high cost of controlling TB is not sustainable, not for farm businesses, nor to my departmental budget. I can assure members that tackling this disease and all the factors which contribute to its spread and endurance is a top priority for me in my new role. In terms of animal welfare, I want to be an advocate for animal welfare issues. It is something I know that we can all agree on, that improving animal welfare and stopping animal cruelty should be a priority for everyone. Working with stakeholders and partners across the piece, I believe we can find a way to modernise and bring animal welfare legislation not just in line with other jurisdictions, but for us to become an exemplar for others. In terms of XL bully type dogs, you will have seen this morning I announced the introduction of new safeguards surrounding these dogs in Northern Ireland. I'll not go into too much about this because I did outline it this morning, but I'm happy to take questions in relation to that. In terms of the Rural Development Programme, as Minister, I am also fully aware of my responsibilities to fully consider rural policy post-EU exit. I wish to reassure you as a committee that despite the cessation of the Northern Ireland Rural Development Programme, my department continues to invest in and support our rural communities through a range of Northern Ireland executive and departmental interventions. As a priority, I am now considering the future of rural policy, including how rural communities can be supported. However, it is important to note that responsibility for addressing social and economic issues affecting rural communities rests primarily with the departments that have the statutory remit. Members will be aware that the Rural Needs Act 2016 places a duty on public authorities to have due regard to the social and economic needs to people in rural areas when exercising their functions. The Department continues to support public authorities to help ensure that the Act is implemented effectively and delivers better outcome for rural dwellers. Committee, I have only touched on a few of my key issues and priorities going forward. However, given the wide and varied remit of my department, I could not possibly address them all in my opening remarks. You can be assured it does not mean that I do not consider them to be important. I look forward to working closely with the committee in tackling all the issues and working alongside you all on areas of shared interest. Chair, that concludes my opening remarks. I look forward to taking questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for that wide-ranging report on your first day priorities. I'm going to just move over to the Chair of the committee, Tom Elliott, here now. Maybe you might want to ask a few questions here. Tom?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to the Minister for the presentation. Just a couple of very quick questions. The Badger Cull or the Wildlife Intervention Scheme, Minister, obviously there was a court case that stopped that process. I'm just wondering what's your view on taking that forward now?
And thank the Chair for his question in relation to that. So I know that there was a legal challenge to that, and the decision found against the Department on 3 grounds of challenge. Namely, the Department failed to properly undertake a consultation process which complied with the relevant legal requirements, that it did not disclose relevant scientific papers, and there had not been adequate consideration of the responses to the consultation. So I'm very aware of that, and I'm very aware of the strength of public feeling around this and the petitions that were presented to the Assembly at the time in relation to this matter. What I need to do in terms of tackling bovine TB is I need to work with stakeholders and also be guided by the evidence and science to find a way through this tunnel. Currently there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and I will be exploring options in relation to this. It is no secret of our own party's party policy in relation to the matter question in relation to this, but as Minister I'm coming into this with a clean desk, and I'm looking at the issues around this and trying to find a way forward. I'm conscious that this is a significant issue, particularly in Fermanagh, and I'm also conscious that the herd incidence rate, whilst it's at 10%, in the south, for example, it's 5%. So we need to find a way forward. The Chief Veterinary Officer often tells me this is a complex and multifactorial matter, and I totally get that. So I'm saying to you today that I'm coming to this here, looking at the different issues, and we'll be hopefully coming back to the committee in the time ahead. It'll not be in the next few weeks because we need to make sure whatever we're going to do here attracts the support of stakeholders, but it's also something that's legally robust that I can proceed with.
Okay, thanks, Minister. So, in other words, you've nothing firmly in place at the moment or in mind to take that forward, or the overall TB strategy even forward?
So I'll be considering the TV strategy and what's sitting there. I know that a number of the actions which haven't been implemented are more longer term in relation to that. We've had significant engagement internally within the department around the issues associated with that, and officials will be coming back with me with some options associated with that. Is there anything more you want to say, Katrina?
Yeah, just Tom, I think to pick up on the Minister's point, I think the devastating consequences of this are felt at farm level, and the public purse isn't helped either. So finding an accelerated way through that has stakeholder buy-in and is underpinned by the most robust scientific evidence is the priority for us, and for us as officials, making sure the Minister has that advice and that the way forward is going to make a difference, is going to be affordable, and is going to be absolutely evidence-based.
Yeah. I would say that one thing it does cause me concern, and I probably have outlined that in the chamber previously, is in terms of the budget for next year and what is available to me in that regard, because that does cause me concern if that budget doesn't allow me to continue the levels of compensation around that. And I totally understand from my engagement with stakeholders the level of devastation that occurs when TB arrives in the herd, and the need to be able to support those. Essentially, these are businesses, their families often supporting them, and these are livelihoods, and I want to be able to find a way forward that we can find a roadmap out of this, but also continue to provide the support that we need, and that's why the budgetary cover is absolutely essential for me.
Okay, Chair, if I could maybe be permitted one other, and that is around the ammonia strategy. And obviously it could have a devastating impact on agricultural development in the future, Minister. So I'm wondering where you are with that.
Yeah, so I'm very conscious of the implications around this, because in terms of planning applications, the frustration around the delays associated with that and being out on farms over the last number of weeks, I see the operational circumstances that are there, and I don't say this lightly, but how to tackle ammonia is extremely complex. I'm also conscious that the situation that we're in and the decisions that Katrina had to take were taken, well, frankly, because there was no other option. And I would like to put it on record here in committee, as my first committee meeting, my thanks to the officials, Katrina and so many others within the department, for the work that they've done, particularly over the last 2 years without ministers in place. They've done a fantastic job without ministers in place, and I am so grateful for the work that's done. We're in the situation we're in now because we needed to make sure that we're on the right side of the law. There's sort of two areas around this which is important to outline. The draft ammonia strategy underwent public consultation in 2023, and the response from that is being compiled and will be with me shortly in relation to that. I would want to be bringing forward a reworked ammonia strategy and new standing advice in the time ahead. But what I want to make sure is whatever I bring forward is that it is actually something that is sustainable, taking us in the future. I totally get the frustration around this. I get the frustration in terms of the impact this has, particularly in rural areas, especially in the West, associated with that. I get that, and we need to find a way forward which safeguards the farms, but also, very importantly, the environment. Do you want to say anything else?
Just to maybe make the point that this is not, of course, unconnected to that wider work that the Minister talked about, particularly in relation to Lough Neagh and the environmental improvement plan. So that link between ammonia and water quality, absolutely clear. I think it's also fair to say that the consultation responses, while I haven't seen the summary myself yet, I have a fair sense that they were probably fairly evenly divided between those who thought the draft strategy didn't go far enough and those who thought it perhaps went too far. And I think that just gives an illustration of the complexity of the issue and the different views and aspirations that need to be balanced.
Yeah, just to say, Deputy Chair, that I suppose coming into this, you've probably seen the first day brief that I got, and a copy of that. So once I was appointed as Minister, we went, and about half an hour later went through that, and I got a quick understanding on a lot of the issues that are now on my desk are not simple or easy around that. They're complex, and there's probably two challenges. One, doing something that is sound, that we can stand over, and second of all, bringing people with us. And I am trying my best to bring people with me, and I would say that the people I've engaged with to date, I want to thank them for their sort of flexibility, their kindness, their real willingness to engage with me, and particularly the Ulster Farmers Union, who I think have shown themselves in a really good light in terms of their ability to engage with myself as Minister, and I want to say thank you to them for that.
Thank you, Tom. Minister,
Thank you.
I want to sort of underline what Tom said as well, because we're both from the West, and we do have a lot of environmentally sensitive sites down in the West, and obviously we want to stop. We appreciate the impact of money on those sites, but given the fact that there's more environmentally sensitive sites in the West, that then has a knock-on impact for farm business in those areas, and given the makeup of the population of the North, it creates an equality impact as well in the West, given the fact that we disproportionately hit by the amount of damage. And that also goes for the equipment as well. See a lot of the low emission spreading equipment, see small hill farmers, I think it's important to also look at low emission spreading equipment for slurry, for example, that would facilitate the very hill farmers as well, because that's a more challenging environment there as well. So see, in terms of the and I agree with you completely, the Secretary of State's intervention around the TB compensation was very, very unhelpful, and again I want to impress the importance of moving that on, and like yourself, I was at the NI Farm Family Day last week here up here in the Assembly, and was speaking to the Farmers Union at length, and the devastation of TB on farms is unbelievable. And there was one example given during a conversation of a farmer who had built up a 40-year of bloodlines on his farm, and it just wiped out in one go. So like his 18,000 cattle had to be culled last year because of TB, so it's a serious issue that, from an animal welfare point of view, that we need to get to grips with as well. I suppose that just the two wee things I want to just mention is, in terms of your future agriculture policy, has there been more consideration given to including a sheep scheme in the future policy, and also in terms of, have you had any engagements with the UK government, the Treasury, around securing like a future budget for what I term the new single farm payment?
Yeah. So I'll deal with those two issues and some of the comments were leading up to that. In terms of the ammonia stuff, I spoke to Minister Charlie McConalogue on Friday when I was in Lifford for the launch of PGI status for Irish grass-fed beef, and we have agreed with one of our immediate priorities is to meet in terms of North-South Ministerial Council to discuss some of these issues such as ammonia and bovine TB, because these are shared challenges. So I'd be interested to have a discussion about how they're dealing with that and how we're doing that. So I think that North, South and East, West, and speaking to my Scottish counterpart, I think it's tomorrow, I think there's opportunities there for collaboration and engagement. In terms of the farm support programme and the support for sheep, I was at a sheep farm in Park in Burns on Wednesday, and it was really useful opportunity to engage and have that understanding around that. And in terms of the economics associated with that, particularly hill farming and sheep, and the need for support around that, I'm conscious that there has been a working group and a report that's came back in relation to this, and it's something I do want to give consideration to, because the clear impression I've got is that in terms of being involved in sheep farming, the challenges around that from the economics perspective are great, and it also causes me concern in the context of that and other issues, that how do we attract more younger people into farming when you have this situation around that. And I think that's a key challenge for this department, of myself as Minister. In terms of the budget for the farm support programme, obviously the Chancellor will be announcing his budget tomorrow. I do have concerns around that. I have concerns, and this is a political comment, that the UK government seem to be set on tax cuts rather than investing in public services, and also in terms of supporting our farming community, and the need for the budgets for the next number of years to be properly reflective of the challenges that the industry is facing. We need to be able to invest in a just transition. What that means to me is about supporting our farming community in the time ahead. It's not lost upon me that this budget that comes to my department is ring-fenced, and I think that is useful. The issue is that over time it has not kept pace with inflation, so in real terms it has actually been cut, and what we need to do is we need to see that changed. So we need to ensure that the UK government changes tack and ensures that the budgets that come here to Northern Ireland that support our valuable sector are actually reflective of the challenges that they face. So I have reached out to the DAERA Secretary, inviting them here. I've also said that I will go and see him. So I am trying my best to engage with the UK government from this perspective. I have also met the Secretary of State, and then in the first few days following restoration, also the Prime Minister. So I'm committed to working with the UK government, but there has to be an appreciation that in terms of Northern Ireland, the funding settlement we are receiving is not sufficient for our needs, and I see that in terms of engaging with our agricultural community. They're doing a lot of work, but they need more support, and we need that from the UK government.
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to move around the room. John, you're first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for your presentation. It's a particular pleasure to welcome you here today as a committee member, And also to extend that welcome to Katrina. I'll add, Minister, you took the lines from me, but I'm not complaining at all. I was going to open with thanks to the team that Katrina leads in DAERA for the way they kept those of us who are MLAs and spokespersons for our parties and our respective teams updated during the collapse of government and the impasse that we had. We're grateful for that, and we know the challenges that you had were greater because of the absence of government. But on the specifics, Minister, of the presentation today, can I start by thanking you for the emphasis you have placed upon the fact that your department is a department of 3 distinct divisions or directorates: environment, agriculture and rural affairs, and that none of them has priority over the other. Because, putting it bluntly, it hasn't always felt like that, either at committee or the assembly or in the media. So in light of that, as someone who has called for every policy and every practice to be on the table for review in the backdrop of the Lough Neagh ecological crisis, can I ask if that examination of our waterways, and we know the condition of all of them, none of them are rated as good, if that general waterways issue, and specifically the Lough Neagh issues, will be considered with particular attention paid to it in the environmental improvement plan that's been brought forward currently?
Yeah, so thank you, John, and I echo those comments around officials, and it's not been easy without ministers in post, and I think it's important we put that thanks on the record. In terms of Lough Neagh, obviously it was one of the first visits I undertook as Minister, and I'm grateful for Lough Neagh Partnership for welcoming me there and for departmental officials showing me the loch. I say this from a genuine place. I feel a sense of shame that Lough Neagh has been allowed to get into the situation it has. But what's different this year compared to last year is we have ministers in place, we have an executive in place, we have an assembly committee in place, and I think it's right that this committee is in place to scrutinise and hold me and the other ministers to account. I think that's really, really important. And what we can do is we can shape a course out of where we are. I think if the focus is just upon the actual loch, which is the bed and soil and just the immediate area, it is actually losing any understanding of where the problems came about. Because what happened last year is the problem which has been bubbling below the surface came to the top. But what was bubbling below the surface occurred over decades, and it occurred because of environmental mismanagement. And I make it clear that one of the first motions I responded to in the chamber was around Lough Neagh. I'm not into blame game, because I think if we go down that road, no one's going to win. And I think it may feel good to blame different people, but it actually doesn't move us one step closer. If anything, it moves us backwards around that. So we have to understand how do we sort of chart a course forward. So the environmental improvement plan is a wider Northern Ireland strategy. There's river basin management plan as well, which links into that. There's so many different things who link in to the environmental improvement plan, which is reflecting upon the catchment area of Lough Neagh. So when one of the first days when I met Katrina, we were going through maps of Lough Neagh, and it was showing you the catchment area around it. And I think it would be very useful if that could be shared widely to people of Northern Ireland, so they understand this isn't just a problem in Toome, it's much bigger than that, and we all know that there's contributing factors around this. So we have the agricultural runoff, we have wastewater infrastructure, of which needs massive investment around that, and have concerns in terms of capital funding from the UK government to allow us to do that. We have septic tanks. We also have the arrival of zebra mussels, and which have contributed to this. We have climate change. We can't have a situation where essentially what we're doing is hoping and praying the weather's going to be better this summer, so the problem isn't as bad. Climate change is here, and it's here for the long term for us to be able to tackle. But these are all the issues that are feeding into this. So if we are genuinely, sincerely wanting to address Lough Neagh, it's going to require a really concerted effort across government and society to do that. And it's going to, very, very key, it's going to require funding. So we're going to have to put money into doing this. So we need to help our agricultural community to adapt to new ways of working. We need to invest in our wastewater infrastructure. We need to be able to provide a way to get replacement for the old septic tanks. We need to find a better way for management of Lough Neagh. And probably in closing, I would say that there's been a lot of media interest in my meeting with Earl Shaftesbury, perhaps unfortunately and wrongly so on that meeting than on this meeting, because I consider this meeting to be more crucial, because this is where we have the scrutiny and we have the discussion around the wider policy issues. The ownership of Lough Neagh will not solve these fundamental issues. In some ways, it is a distraction from the key issues ahead and the difficult decisions we've got to take. And I would say that I've been very, very heartened by the level of consensus amongst political parties and politicians in society about getting into this. And I think that is really, really to be encouraged. And I would rather we continue that road where we work together. So anything I announce in terms of the action plan, which hopefully will come in April or May, I really want to have that situation where I'm announcing that after having the buy-in from the stakeholders around us. So I know it's quite a long answer, but I think Lough Neagh perhaps stands up there as something that's a reflection of what went wrong, but how we can turn things around.
Chair, just a couple more points. This one relates to, and it's a welcome statement by the Minister that he intends to conduct an environmental governance review. The stats and the science around our waterways and our quality and our peatlands would suggest that that is very much required. So is it the case that governance review would be looking at the potential for nature protection and nature recovery, as well as the mechanisms of governance? Would that be the case?
I'm very conscious coming into this post, there's a very changed landscape in terms of environmental governance. We have the Office of Environmental Protection, which I think plays an important role around that, but we've also left the EU. So meeting with Minister Charlie McConalogue on Friday, very different landscape for him in terms of environmental governance than it is for me in Northern Ireland. So what I want to do is that review. It's an internal review with officials in terms of whether our environmental governance is fit for purpose. My party has a long-standing commitment to an independent environmental protection agency, but if I'm to bring forward proposals for that, I need to bring people with me. I need people to be demonstrated of the benefits associated with that. It is a commitment, a new decade, new approach amongst parties, so I think it's important that we consider it in that context. The environmental governance is key, and it has to be, and from my own perspective, should be independent, because of where it's important to be here at the committee. We also need to have a body which is independent and which can essentially call me out for issues. I know EEP plays an important role, but it's just one part of the landscape. So hopefully that responds to your question.
It does, yeah, and thank you, Chair. With your permission, my final point is more about the department's connection with communities. The Permanent Secretary, this may be more for officials than for the Minister. The Minister and the Permanent Secretary can decide. The Permanent Secretary, be aware, I've previously written a number of times on issues addressing the current state of the Department's public banking estate, which appears to be closed, certainly hasn't been stocked, and also on a previous very crucial community outreach programme, which would have connected well with the more disadvantaged members of our communities and the more isolated. Assistance there to engage people in angling and provide what you might call, for want of a better phrase, social fishing. All of that has been frozen. I know that these things are often the low-hanging fruit, but they're also very often the low-hanging fruit, the removal of which affects mostly the most disadvantaged members of our society. Can I ask if there are any moves in place to try to re-establish, first of all, that community outreach? Both fisheries and forestry within DAERA are very well placed to do that, and also to try to reinvigorate and relaunch the public angling estate.
I'd like Katrina to answer most of that. I'm just aware around the angling estate that I've received a significant volume of correspondence from members of the public, angling groups, and also from elected representatives in terms of the stocking of the fishing estate, and as a result of the zebra mussels being discovered in the Morvanagar fish farm in June 2023. So I'm aware of that, and I'll be engaging with officials of the time ahead how to deal with that. That is not simple, by the way, because we have an issue there in terms of the legislation and how we deal with that. Okay, but I'll let Katrina answer the more of the other issues around the angling estate.
Maybe just add on the public angling estate. So we have about 90 public angling waters, so about 27 of them are stocked from Morvanagar. That means the bulk of them are available and well used. Your point, though, John, isn't at all wrong. By its nature, quite often some of the stuff that we do across government that is discretionary is the stuff that is different, exciting, innovative, and when budgets are so tight, we end up coming back to the things that the law requires us to do, and that means we do less of the discretionary things that actually can be really meaningful. So I think a challenge for both of us in our respective roles will be in terms of the budget settlement and working out how we use whatever budget we get to the best possible effect in terms of well-being and supporting those who most need our support. What that will look like, I simply don't know until we see what the budget irons out at, but I do absolutely take the point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Patsy.
My good Kylie. Minister, good to see you in this formal capacity, and you too, Katrina. You mentioned earlier there that Lough Neagh, which is a topic near and dear to my own heart and very near to where I live, was a first-year priority for the Executive. In practical terms, what does that mean? And maybe just attach that, if you could bear with me. You mentioned also improving water quality. I've just asked a question of the Minister for Infrastructure there about, and I did tag on to the end of it, and by way of a supplementary, the flow from sewage disposal works into Lough Neagh. Now, his answer was, now, I'm not saying he practically said that he was questioning the evidence given by NIEA as to the quantity of input from the likes of, say, phosphates into the lough, but he was saying he wanted more robust evidence around that. I'm not sure whether that was kicking the tin down the alleyway or what, but I would be interested to hear just on those two items. Number one, how is it a priority? You've mentioned some measures there. How is it a priority for the Executive? And then secondly, in terms of water quality, what liaison is going on between the likes of NIEA and NI Water stroke DFI? Because there seems to be a wee bit of difference there, we'll put it.
Yeah, no, it's no problem. So in terms of what's contributing to Lough Neagh, I've got good news for that. So Alfie have been doing a piece of research around that. We already have figures from just sort of Northern Ireland wide, but they're doing a particular analysis around that, and I think that will help feed into that. I have spoken to Minister O'Dowd around this in terms of the investment in wastewater infrastructure, and that sort of echoes some of my concerns around the capital investment and our capacity to be able to invest in wastewater infrastructure, because that is not only holding back house building and economic development, but also is contributing towards pollution. So it's having a real consequence in terms of Lough Neagh, and I'll continue to engage with Minister O'Dowd over the time ahead, because we need to do that to try to find a way forward in this. In terms of the Executive and being a year one priority, it was one of our first Executive meeting. It was on the agenda, and I working with the First Minister and Deputy First Minister, there's been engagement around that in recent days to ensure that how we can ensure that this is put very high on the agenda of the Executive, because this is a public concern, not just for the people who live, work and visit Lough Neagh, but for Northern Ireland. So we see it's a demonstration of what we need to do in terms of improving environmental governance. I think the ultimate demonstration in terms of commitment will be the budgets associated with that, because without the investment required, we are going to be impeded in terms of doing the interventions that are needed around this. Is there anything else you want to say?
Just that point, I think, Patsy, about its link then into a wider programme for government. So, you can't tackle Lough Neagh in isolation from looking at the environment more generally. The Minister's mentioned the catchment area. A look at the map of the catchment area tells you that, it's half of Northern Ireland. So you can't see Lough Neagh in isolation. And there is, I think, the importance then of working through the Environmental Improvement Programme, supporting it with the Lough Neagh Action Plan, and then making sure that in the Programme for Government, when it's agreed, in the investment strategy and in the budget, that recognition of the environment is fully there. And just on the working with DFI, it would be a bad job if Dennis and I, given our respective previous roles, weren't working well together. But even as recently as I think yesterday or the day before, this is only Tuesday, so it must have been yesterday, the senior stakeholders on water were actually meeting. So that includes NI Water, the department, our Drinking Water Inspectorate. So those conversations are very much alive and well.
I'd like to see, obviously, a cohesion between all departments that are relevant to Lough Neagh. Just on that, because the Minister, I'm not quite sure if the phrase robust science that he used, but you used it there too in regard to TB. Do you feel that the science that the department has collated up until now hasn't been robust enough? Because we seem to have been on this committee talking for quite a considerable number of years about TB and the various elements of research that has been done into it.
So I'm aware that the issue of TB has been on the agenda for a number of years, as you've outlined.
Yes.
The herd instances is now of significant concern in relation to that. I think there is value at, as myself as Minister, to come into this afresh in terms of how we're approaching this. And I would say, for example, not to criticise the Secretary of State again, but I will, that the budget that we were given as a department for this year meant that we had to make essentially very difficult decisions, and decisions that you actually were retrograde, but they had to be made in order to balance the budget. So, for example, the testing regime had to be reduced in order to try to keep us within line, and I think it's important that we would try to get back to the testing regime pre the budget cuts, because what we need to do with regards to TB, some of these basics here, is to ensure that we're testing to the efficient level possible so we can identify the herd infection around that. So that's one thing that I'm bidding for in terms of the budget for next year, so we can get back to higher levels of testing around this.
Maybe I'm a bit confused, but testing would be one thing.
Yeah.
Robust scientific evidence to me means something else in terms of sources and the likes of that. So that would you use the phrase, Katrina? So maybe you want to come back to me as to what
No,
that is.
and I think it's a fair point, but actually, the key thing is that science doesn't stand still. So the challenge for us is making sure we keep up to date with the very latest evidence, the very latest data, and the role that our chief scientific advisor plays in that is absolutely crucial. And one of the things we have tried to do over recent months is reposition science so that it is much more firmly embedded in the way we provide policy advice to ministers across every part of the department, and that we have the right networks to keep abreast of the very latest developments. So if I take Lough Neagh, for example, one of the things we did there was to make sure that we had an expert science working group, so that the people with the very up-to-date expertise in this area from across these islands and able to tap into an international network were providing that information. So science, whether it is the science that many of us understand in terms of the chemistry or the physics or the biology, or increasingly, as the Minister mentioned, behavioural science and social science, is going to be how we find ways through some of the challenges we face. And that also came out if you look at the Climate Change Committee's advice in relation to climate action plans, that we're going to be increasingly reliant on science and innovation if we were to meet the challenge of net zero.
Yeah. So can I conclude from that science hasn't been sufficiently central then to the departmental thinking or the departmental action process up until now?
I don't think I'd be fair to say that, Patsy. I think the issue is that the scale of the challenge now means we have to. We're more reliant upon that, and we have to explore every avenue that's available to us around this, because of the essentially, yes, it's affecting our budgets, but the thing that worries me more is the impact upon farming communities and the devastation that's causing around that. So, I'm going to make sure that we are looking at every opportunity we can to find a way out of this.
And thank you for that, Minister, and no doubt your commitment to that. One final thing then, as you mentioned AFBI earlier, and AFBI has been really, really important in terms of all aspects of what the department was doing, food science and all those types of things. So therefore, are you anticipating a significant investment in AFBI to carry out the environmental work that has just hit us last year with Lough Neagh, but as well as that, other aspects of what the departmental role will now be, as Katrina has said, is an evolving one?
There's three aspects to that, sorry. One is in terms of capital investment. So some of our estate is older than me, so we need to be able to invest
older than me too.
So we need to invest in that.
To you, the one age.
So it's not as old as you. So we need to invest in that. Yeah,
Come back.
Veteran. Now with the cost.
So we need to invest in that. So there's capital funding. There's good work been done to lay the land for that. So we need to be doing that. Second one is particularly around north-south stuff and Shard Island programme. It's something I'm keen to explore much further, what we can do around that. And then the third one is just in terms of our own budgets and our own focus around this. I think there's also an element of which I as Minister have to give more profile to the importance of science and for it not to be undervalued. So that's why recently, as part of the Northern Ireland Science Festival, I was down in terms of the research festival in Belfast. Now what I did see is a boat that was pretty old, but reliable and decent, and really fantastic staff. Really good to see young people coming on board, getting involved. You know, that's something we really want to see, but we want to make this as an attractive career for people, and people are choosing it, but we want to get more people to invest in it. And I think there's an opportunity for Northern Ireland, if we play our cards right, that we can actually sell Northern Ireland as a place that's seen to be an exemplar in relation to investment in science and associated with businesses. And that's something I'm quite keen to do with the sort of private sector to see what we can achieve.
Right.
Thank you very much.
I want to just on the TV point there, you know, we have been rattling this around for a long time, and Tom Elliott, remember when we were in the DAERA committee about a decade ago, I was out in a field in County Down one morning at 5 a.m. looking at the TVR in operation, and obviously we had the TB partnership as well, so there is a serious amount of body of evidence and research that's been done there. Other thing, just before we move around to Michelle, is to see in relation to the Lough Neagh as well, I think it'd be worthwhile in any of your conversations with Minister McConalogue to include that, because you'll be aware that the Blackwater runs into it there through County Monaghan into Lough Neagh as well. So I'm going to move around to Michelle.
Thank you, and you're very welcome to the committee, and thank you for your presentation. And delighted that tackling TB is one of your priorities, and you're committed to that. Obviously, I'd like to see some progress on the strategy, which would include wildlife intervention. Also, maybe reassured by reading between the lines that the outcome of the compensation consultation maybe isn't a fait accompli. So we'll wait for the results of that. Obviously, we had representation last week from your officials, and I suppose what was quite concerning, listening to the Chief Veterinary Officer with the challenges in relation to recruiting vets and the remuneration and so on around that. So hopefully we'll see something that will encourage vets to the department, and that we don't lose them elsewhere. I have a series of questions which are unrelated to that, and if the Chair will indulge me, I'd just like to ask if the Minister or his officials have had any direct engagement with the government in relation to commitments which were contained in the Safeguarding the Union command paper.
Yes, so I have had engagement with the UK government. I met with the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State. It was on the Monday after restoration, and I've continued to make those engagements. Ultimately, that is a UK government paper in relation to that, and I've said this in the House, and I do say this today, and I said it in a very genuine manner. As I come into this role seeking to find solutions where there is problems, I don't seek to exacerbate the problems. What I seek to do is try to find a way through them. I would say to people that if they have any issues or direct concerns in relation to these issues, to bring them to me and to bring them to our officials, and we'll seek to work through them. I think that the Windsor Framework was a significant step forward in terms of enabling businesses in Northern Ireland to be able to operate. I'm quite keen that we use the opportunities that arise from that. I know that the road from EU exit is not a simple, plain, easy road. It is always going to be bumpy associated with that. But what I'm determined to do is play my role wherever I'm given the chance to do that, to be constructive on that. I engaged with officials, for example, last week around the issue of veterinary medicines. I know that the deadline is December 2025, but in reality it's much before that. And I'm engaging with stakeholders over the time ahead to see what way you can do, bring solutions to this. I know primarily this is something between the UK government and the EU, but I'm determined to try to play a constructive role in bringing solutions to this. So that gives you a flavour of my approaches towards trying to deliver upon the obligations upon me, and there is legal obligations upon me, but doing it in a proportionate manner which delivers to the people of Northern Ireland.
Okay, and so in saying that, will you then support the elimination of all sort of routine physical and identity checks on goods moving within the UK internal market system as it's envisaged in the Safeguarding the Union command paper? And will you be supportive and not stand in the way of any transfer of powers which may then have to be taken back to Westminster in order to ensure the removal of those checks?
I'm conscious that the command paper is a command paper. We all know what the legal standing of a command paper is. What my go-to at the moment is what my legal obligations as Minister and my officials have in terms of the law, and we will uphold the law. I said this at the first question time, as my duty is to uphold the law, and I will implement the law. But we do not seek to do that in a way which is disproportionate or overzealous. We do it in a way which is correctly in line with the law.
And I suppose I am cognizant of some of the legal changes haven't yet taken effect. However, I just want to check something out with regards to some of the checks that have been taking place over the last short while. So since you've taken up office, have you or your officials given a direction to increase the level of visual checks on agri-food from GB at NI ports? And I'm saying this because anecdotally we're hearing back that this may have happened, particularly for some supermarkets. One retailer has told us that out of 47 chilled trailers arriving into Northern Ireland from GB over a 4-day period last week, 40% were stopped for inspection by DAERA and 10% were detained for a considerable period of time. So I just want to be reassured that there hasn't been a direction given in respect of that, and that people aren't being overzealous for a particular reason, because obviously there are impacts on particularly fresh food.
Yeah. So I can make it very clear to the committee today, I've given no direction of any sort in relation to that, and I have no desire to. One of the frustrations I have around this is anecdotal reports. People, if they have concerns or issues, they need to bring them to me and to my officials in relation to that, and we can consider those and we can find a way to address any concerns around that. But there's been no direction given, nor has been no desire to be overzealous in relation to this. My job as Minister is to implement the law, and it is my clear desire to ensure that we support businesses over the time ahead. And I don't seek to make any issue out of this. All I seek to do is do my job and stay on the right side of the law and ensure that we engage with people to bring solutions where they bring any problems to me.
Yeah, I mean, just to add, Michelle, I mean, from a civil servant's perspective, our code of ethics requires us to uphold the law. I don't see any scenario in which we would be taking action other than as required by the law. And I think if there are examples, in most cases where I have seen concerns raised, we have been able to trace them back to a lack of compliance. So we've been able to reconcile what happened to a load with the level of compliance it demonstrated. But as the Minister says, it is not in anybody's interest to do anything other than uphold the law, and that's very much where I and my staff are.
Thank you. A note from the first day brief that the Department placed a bid for 5.6 million for 23-24 to Treasury for the implementation of the Windsor Framework, and 4.7 million was received. Have officials managed to work within the budget received? Could you maybe shed some light on what next year's budget might be, and whether the Treasury will continue to fund this, or will it become a future burden on Northern Ireland's budget?
I'd like to try and come back to more detail on that, but I would say if the UK Government has a desire to ensure the smooth implementation of the Windsor Framework, they need to ensure that they properly pay for all the costs associated with that. So the ball's in their court in relation to that, but I'll let Katrina talk about the more detail
on this year, you're right, we were slightly short of what we asked for, and we're doing everything we can to live within what was allocated. For next year, we're awaiting details of what we might be allocated, but it's really important to stress that the Windsor Framework cuts across so many parts of the department. It's not just agri-food, it's not just SPS checks. It takes us into areas that link to the environment, to herbicides and pesticides, to chemicals, to all aspects of animal health, to packaging. So there are lots and lots of pieces of work that individual officials need to do to make sure that we continue to be compliant. And as I've said in other fora, in many ways, I've described the Windsor Framework as your forever friend, because it's not a date at which you achieve implementation. We constantly have to understand the risks of divergence. So there's a lot of work across several parts of the department, and really what we've been trying to do is identify what that work involves, what staff we would need to put to it. My hope, if I look at the agreements reached on funding for the devolved administrations, this is not a level of activity that there is comparable activity in Scotland or Wales, for example. So it seems intuitively right to me that this should be a separate allocated fund, and I'm more than happy to account for it as an earmarked fund, but I don't know yet what we will get for next year. I do know, though, that we do have a huge work programme that we need to work through to make sure we're constantly delivering.
Just in respect to the facilities at Larne, Belfast and Warren Point, has DAERA shared with DAERA the final costs of that and when the completion is likely to be?
They have to be completed, if I remember correctly, by July 2025. That's a requirement. So they're all in various stages of progress. It is DAERA that is leading the construction, and it's DAERA that it's accountable. Our interest, of course, is in making sure that the facilities being built are operable by our staff, because it's our staff who will perform the competent authority requirements, whatever they may be. So there is very good joint working. I don't have the costs right in front of me. I can ask DAERA for them if that's helpful.
Right, and just with regards to the cost for DAERA for manning, the cost, and that comes out of that money that's been bid for?
The construction costs are being met directly by DAERA, because it's DAERA that's doing the construction. In terms of the staff for the points of entry, those are being met by Treasury.
Okay. And just one question, just in the absence of my colleague William Irwin, who's
Oh,
apologised
right.
for being sick.
Tom Buchanan's not here as well. You know?
I thought of a question for him yet.
I think it's discretion to former ministers, you know.
Can you provide an update on the situation around Blue Tongue in GB and the barriers of movement of animals to Northern Ireland? Because obviously this is something which is becoming more and more critical. And I know that I'm experiencing that even for farmers within my own constituency.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'll make sure I give you the correct information on Blue Tongue. So I'm aware of this issue because I've received correspondence and I've received assembly questions in relation to that. On the 11th of November 2023, GB confirmed a single case in a cow in Kent. There have now been 118 individual cases in England. As a result, we are aware of the restrictions associated with that. The DAERA, in terms of the UK government, has not applied for regionalisation associated with this. I'm aware of the concerns, and they come from both perspectives. One, to protect us from Blue Tongue, and the other one in terms of animal movements. I have been engaging with the sector around these issues, and I'll continue to engage. I'm conscious of the implications associated with this, but also then the need to protect us from this. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, just to say that officials have been keeping in touch with, and in fact a few weeks ago had a meeting specifically on this with key stakeholders, and the overriding message was the importance of preventing the disease from getting into Northern Ireland, and that was the area that they most wanted us to focus on.
And for those farmers who have purchased livestock and can't get them across the sea, are you looking at a compensation scheme in order to be able to assist them with some of that?
We're not presently looking at that, and we would have to explore whether they have budget cover for that, and also particularly varies associated with that as well.
Absolutely, because it's the inability of the GB authorities to sign the export health certificates that's the barrier.
There's obviously a cost.
We understand that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I suppose just a couple of wee bits just before we go, just on the rural affairs end of things. You see there, obviously we're like 3 years past the last rural development programme, and under the N+3, isn't it? You know, we're seeing the last of the spend happening now. But you know, obviously, I think at some point we're going to start really feeling the pinch in rural communities. You know, because we don't have village renewal scheme, we don't have basic services schemes, for example, which are the heartbeat of rural communities, and obviously it's a source of frustration that the Department of Communities don't don't fund regeneration and settlements below 5,000. So that is that kind of rules out rural villages and towns. So, is there a chance that in the new rural programme coming forward that we will see potentially another small settlement scheme or a rural micro grant scheme or basic services? Because I do believe that as we move forward, and certainly if we want to invest in health and community cohesion, that's so important.
So I'm engaging with officials this week around this area. I know we've had a good conversations about this in recent times. I do think the whole area of rural development funding and support has been an area which has been a casualty of EU exit and has been overlooked in some elements around that. And I intend to see what I can do to address that. But the only thing that will inhibit me from that will be the budget cover that I have to be able to do this. So there's a wider picture in terms of getting a wider understanding and appreciation from government departments of their need to ensure that rural affairs is properly given consideration to. I know there's the Act and the requirements associated with that, but if we're ultimately going to step up as a government in Northern Ireland to ensure rural communities are properly supported, that has to be across government. In terms of the future rural policy, as I said, I will be meeting with officials this week in relation to this. I see the benefits that were associated with the leader type approach around that, so I totally get that. So what we need to do is take lessons in terms of what the positives were going in the past. Also, and we've talked to committee members in recent days and weeks, in terms of the rural micro capital grant scheme, the officials are finalising work in relation to that and hope to make an announcement about that soon enough, and alongside the rural business development grant scheme. So, and then also there's the Tackling Rural Poverty Social Isolation Programme, which is also known as TRIPSI. I think we have the most acronyms in this department than any department whatsoever, but I'm getting into that. And I think the Tackling Rural Poverty and Social Isolation to me is quite important. So from the 4 weeks I've taken on this role, I have seen isolation. I've seen minority groups particularly feeling isolated, also women, and I'm really conscious of that. And also lastly, mental health is a massive concern for me. So if you're on a farm business and you, for example, get TB infection in your herd, that's a devastating impact, not just for your business, but for your family, for your livelihood, and for the wider community. And we need to see what way we can better support people in rural areas. So this is something, as I said, I'm engaging with officials this week in relation to this. And I think we also need to increase understanding that when you spend money on this, you get a much better return on your investment in terms of what we can actually do. And I know there was previously the community hall scheme and the benefits associated with that. So be assured that this is on the agenda, and I understand the frustration that where we are at the moment.
And maybe just Chairman or Deputy Chair mentioning Peace Plus as well. Yeah. So I mean, one of the specific measures in Peace Plus is very much around rural regeneration, social isolation. So we're working very closely with the RCD in the south and with the SEUPB. One of the programmes is already open. I think the rural isolation one is hoping to open for applications later this month. So that will be another source of investment in those rural areas as well.
Will DAERA distribute any of that, or do you deal directly with the Peace Plus or to the councils?
We are. We're partnering through SEUPB and the department in the south, Rural and Community Development, or I can never remember the name of it. Yes, I'm right, Rural and Community Development.
Okay. Listen, I'm going to bring Patsy in for a quick one, and then I'll finish off with the chair, Tom. That's okay?
That's apologies if this is barely covered. I had to go out to make a phone call there. On the whole question of rural isolation and mental health issues and stuff like that, I've got an assembly question back there today. Back at the one to avoid those acronyms, but the trust area in which I live and represent, that's the Northern Trust, has some of the highest figures. In fact, 1,157 people waiting for a package of domiciliary care. Now, where am I going with that? That's in many cases people who are living on their own, rural isolation, people for whom they're the last ones on the list. In many cases where they're waiting for someone to die so that they can avail of a package of care. So also those of us who represent rural areas, mental health problems is a big issue. Where I'm going with that is just how the Rural Development Plan works with the likes of the Health Trust, the Department of Health, around issues such as this. Because there are people who are living on their own, alone, lonely, not able to get care packages, and suffering from deteriorating health, mental and physical. So therefore, any support that's going into some of those areas would, to my mind anyway, it would be useful. It would help to work with the health professionals to, in some sense, try and address those many issues.
That's something I'm quite keen to pick up with the Health Minister and the trusts, because I am very conscious of the Health Service Transformation Programme, which we need to do to ensure that we're getting better patient outcomes, has a particular rural impact.
Yes.
And that's something that I think it's important that I pick up following our conversation, because I think that if you're moving services around in the Greater Belfast area, the impact that has upon people in terms of travel times is much different than in terms of out in rural areas. And let's not forget, I think sometimes there's an impression given otherwise, but Northern Ireland is largely a rural region and society, and we need to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, thanks very much.
I think one of the best examples of Patsy what you raised is the joint funding between the department and the PHA for the farm family health checks plan. That's a classic example. So I might go just give the last word to the chair here. Is that right, Tom? You're looking back in, I would say, yeah.
Thank you, Vice Chair, for that. And just finally, thanks to the Minister and the Permanent Secretary for attending today. My apologies for not being there in person. I'll not ask him to maybe concentrate too much on it today, but there's something that I'd like to hear in the future, and that is the massive bill or financial outlay that there's going to be in relation to climate change, and if that's factored into the department budget, and indeed anything factored in for businesses and households as well, because obviously it's something coming down the line that has to be assessed and obviously dealt with.
No problem. I think this is an important issue, and it also relates back to the climate action plan, which I'm working through at the moment. So the costs that have been circulated and you're aware of are indicative costs, and we still need to finalise what the potential costs are. These I don't see these in the light that some people have seen them. I think that investing in addressing climate change is an opportunity for Northern Ireland. There is a cost of not doing anything associated with it, but there is a great opportunity where we can go with the Green Growth Agenda, and we can essentially deliver a real opportunity for a Green New Deal here in Northern Ireland, but we need to be able to do that with people rather than against them, and that's where the funding is crucial. I do have concerns the trajectory the current UK government has set itself on, which is failing to understand the wider issues around this. In order to achieve net zero by 2050 requires the investment now rather than kick the can down the road, and that's where my concerns is that the current UK government are not understanding the need for investment, and that relates back to the beginning of the committee meeting in terms of investment, for example, in wastewater infrastructure. If we're able to invest in wastewater infrastructure, we're able to protect our environment, but we're also able to do that in a lot more economically sustainable manner, recognising that Northern Ireland Water is the largest user of electricity here in Northern Ireland, but have exciting plans to be able to decarbonise associated with that.
Okay. Enough, Chair?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Declan and Minister and Permanent Sec.
Hey everyone, and thank you. Next meeting is this Thursday at 10 a.m. Tom, you'll be back in action again, is that right? And we're going to adjourn. Remember, I want to thank you all for attending today, particularly Katrina and the Minister, and indeed the officials and all for coming here, so really appreciate that. And I should also add my thanks as well, Katrina, during the 2 years hiatus. Really appreciate the briefings and the meetings as well. Really do appreciate it. I should have said that myself at the outset, so just put it on record here now, okay?
Oh, and thank you. It was really useful for us to be able to test thinking during that period. So certainly for me, it was very, very useful. Conscious I've been here 18 months and this is my first engagement with the DAERA committee, so looking forward to many more.
Oh well, thank you very much. We'll be here, no doubt. Thank you.
Committee Room 30, Sound.